extrapolated. We're waiting for enough board members to show up so that we actually have an Affordable Housing Trust quorum. We need, I believe, 3 more. And I will momentarily start calling folks to remind them, but they tend to trickle in right around now-ish, usually a few minutes late, often from phones in their cars. It is now 6.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, all right. Oh, here's Amy. There we go. Good. Amy.
Yay.
Yep, all right. I'll give Nikki a call.
Hey everyone.
Oh, and here's Ernsto. Hey.
Hey Wayne.
Hi, Amy.
Chris Ann, how you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How about you?
Doing okay.
Hard to believe. It's
Hi,
November.
Ernsto. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Right?
I'm gonna mute myself and give Nikki a call.
Hi, Renzo.
How are you? Good. Hi.
I'm good. I'm good.
Hi Enzo.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, okay. How is everybody doing?
We're good. How about you?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Can you believe it's November?
Ah,
Right? Ooh,
yes, already.
hard to
Some
believe.
radio DJ on my ride into work the other day was listing off all the times to like, okay, so many days to winter, so many days to
Oh.
Christmas. I'm like, oh, stop.
No.
No, it's going to be 75 degrees this weekend. I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Yes, it's gonna be a nice weekend.
We'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it, definitely.
And of course, everybody wants to talk about Christmas before Thanksgiving's even,
Oh.
we even bought the turkey.
That's true. That's true.
So I know Wayne's a little concerned that our quorum's a little lacking. Oh, now Jennifer's here.
Hi, Tim.
Wayne's checking in with Nikki and, oh, she's coming. And we have 2 people from Old Colony already in attendance.
Hello, thank you all for your forbearance. That was our chair, Nikki. She had a bit of a last minute work event, so she will not be able to join us.
Oh.
So she apologizes, but we need 4 for a quorum, and we've got Amy, Chris Ann, Ernso, and Jennifer. Hello, everyone.
Mhm.
And I think, Amy, technically, as our illustrious clerk, that means you get to be our chair.
Okay, very good. Let me pull up the agenda.
Okay,
I didn't print it, but I have it.
all right. And I'll start recording to the cloud, and then once you call it to order, I know ECAT will be recording. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got Joanne and Lori from OCPC sort of in the attendees room, waiting for us to get to that part of the agenda, and then I can bring them in as panelists, and we can talk about the action plan when we get there.
Great.
Yeah, so let me just start the recording.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so I'll call to order the November 3rd, 2022 Affordable Housing Trust meeting. Starting at 6:06 p.m. And do we have to do a roll call? Is that right?
I think so, roll
Yes,
call to
right.
confirm quorum, yeah.
Okay. So Amy Rodriguez here.
Chris Ann Sheedy here.
And so Steven here.
Jennifer Stacy here.
Okay. Did everyone be able to review the September 15th, 2022 minutes?
Yes.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes?
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
All right, so we are at an update regarding 26 Paquonicket and 10 Morse Road.
All righty, thank you.
Yeah.
The folks may remember that 26 Paquonicket Avenue and 10 Worth Road are 2 parcels acquired by the trust, put out an RFP. South Shore Habitat for Humanity was the preferred respondent. We designated them as the developer. We got the approval of the select board, and I'm happy to report that as of this afternoon, we have finalized the purchase and sale agreement. Habitat's lawyers were, or Habitat itself was busy with a project in Cohasset, so their attention was sort of diverted for a little while. But we have a final purchase and sale, and hopefully we can move to the other closing docs within a month.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
And then I was hoping for an update from Nikki about any bills or maintenance at 26 Paquonicket, but we'll just have to defer any updates on that.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay, so this is next up is the discussion about older 40B affordable ownership homes and whether or not we might consider funding renovations prior to a resale.
Yeah, okay, I'm taking notes. So I've got an inquiry out to town council to see if that is something that we legally can do. I've read through the guidance documents from 2015 from the Department of Revenue. You may remember we had our home repair program that was disallowed for a variety of reasons, and there was several pages of guidance from Department of Revenue as to why. And reading through that, I believe that this would be allowed because it would be for income qualified buyers or owners for a restricted affordable unit. So it should not run afoul of the anti-aid amendment and should be an allowable expense of CPA and municipal affordable housing trust funds. So I think that it is something we can do, but of course we would want town council to weigh in on that. And then I also spoke with our building department to try and get a ballpark of general costs for expected big ticket items. Backing up a little bit, there are some, of course, restricted affordable ownership units in town. There are some older ones built back in the 90s that are now being resold. And sometimes these resale units have maintenance and upkeep issues that the former buyer and the new buyer may not have been able to afford or may not have done. So is there a way for the trust to help keep these units in a state of good repair and in circulation as affordable units, maintain their affordability? And some of the expenses as sort of the ballpark, replacing, and this is for a single family, house like a Cape or a raised ranch or something. So a roof, we could expect about 15,000, a complete furnace, whether it be oil tank or gas, and with an air conditioning unit and such, maybe 14,000, maybe 8,000 for the furnace, maybe 14 grand if you're doing a whole HVAC system. Septic could be about 15,000, about 2,000 for a replacement window, maybe about 15 windows for a typical house. So, maybe 25 to 30,000 for windows. Replacing a deck could be about 12,000. Painting a wood-sided house, maybe about 12,000. Putting on vinyl siding could be 25,000. As a way to conceptualize what some of these costs might be. So that's the research I've done so far. And we can certainly have a further conversation at a future meeting if we want some more information, or discuss if this is an interesting program or idea for us to pursue. And happy to field any questions or start making any notes.
Do we know any other towns that do this?
I don't. I didn't get that far in my research, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Where?
Do you need anything from us at this moment?
Not necessarily. I remember from our previous conversation, the group seemed pretty interested in this as a possible idea. And I'm seeing some nods that
Mhm.
yeah, folks might still be pretty interested. So what are the action items here? Confirmation from town council, see if there's other towns that do this that we can model a program on. And then what should we try and do if we're interested in doing it? What an application would look like, program guidelines, we should probably draft something like that up if we think we're at that point of considering it. And then you sort of roll it into, how does this fit in with our other goals, priorities, programs, overall budget? What a dollar amount might look like. I'm imagining, a cap of like 30 grand or 45 grand or something for a couple of the big ticket items.
Mhm.
So, okay, so I need to reach out to other towns.
As of right now, there isn't anyone that's come forward. I know you mentioned someone else, but that's kind of resolved itself.
It seems to be
Take it this-
resolving itself, but that's what really sort of gave rise to this concept, because legitimately the current owner has not really done some of the regular maintenance updates one might expect, and a new buyer wouldn't really have, say 20 grand lying around to address some of these issues. So the price has been discounted, and I think they're going to resolve it that way.
Mhm.
But even if the price goes down, you still don't actually have the money to do it necessarily. So they're trying to work out if that's something that they can do. But as we discussed at the last meeting, just trying to look ahead. This is going to be more and more of an issue as these things change hands.
Mhm.
And it's another sort of concept. Would this be when properties change hands, or would it be sort of an ongoing thing, and you just would apply at need, or first come first serve? Because that starts to feel a little weird. It's like you always just apply for trust funds to do everything, and maybe we just index it to the point of sale and an inspection or something like that. And then if you have like because if it's sort of a general thing, you'd have to have what, like an application deadline or something, you'd have to have rounds. Something like that, or some cap to the amount that you can do each year. And then what happens if there's a sale that doesn't really fall into that timeline? You know, it's like, well, sorry, we don't actually have any funds, or you have to wait till next year to apply or something that doesn't. So maybe it would just be indexed to, you know, the point of sale. You know, for the for
Also
selling
seems-
or new buyer. Go
Also,
ahead.
also seems that would be the time when both parties are motivated to
Yeah, and you'd like set up, have a
work and, yeah,
to get the work done, to have an inspection, because we
Yeah.
have stuff actually based on an inspection. that we
Right.
Prioritize what needs to get done.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll wait for town council guidance. I'll research other towns, see if we have anything to model this on, and try to put together some draft guidelines and, you know, what an application might look like, something like that.
Yeah, go from there. Great,
All right, thank you.
good. Okay, all set?
Yes,
Uh,
please.
Okay, next one is the potential surplus town properties and a discussion about a possible feasibility study.
Yeah, so I think no action on this at the moment. I spoke with the planning director, and she's gonna try and set up a time after special town meeting to speak with the town administrator, and bring in Nikki as well, and, you know, maybe Jen possibly, I don't know who would actually get convened, to see if it would make sense for the trust to do something like that, what the shape of such a study would be. You know, one would, you know, first we need to get and I don't know if it's happened yet. Jen can probably help us. Have we gotten the preferred sites yet? You know, the preferred scenarios, so that we know what the possibility set of this surplus sites are?
I think a lot's gonna depend on what happens coming out of town meeting with the center school rezoning situation. And if that happens, then I think it starts to trigger us to be able to consider the other properties and
Right.
uses. So I would say let's stay tuned for the next meeting, and I can definitely look into that a bit more following town meeting.
Right, and then we'll have the recommendations from the building committee as to their preferred alternative, and
Mhm.
that'll give us a sense of the possibility set. We can narrow that down, thank you. Yeah, so we should get a sense of just what the properties might be, and then what we're looking for the feasibility study to actually show us. And, you know, things we'd really have to consider is most of the sites have, you know, some sites would have historic buildings that it would be kind of irresponsible to demo because they're actually historic resources. Some have existing buildings that would need to be demolished, and that could be kind of pricey, and they may have, you know, asbestos and lead. The DPW site may have environmental concerns as well.
Mhm.
So, you know, these could be big ticket cleanup items, and if so, how does one factor that into the whole process? So it's sort of a conversation that I think needs a lot of foundational talking before we go out with, like, you know, we're looking to hire someone to do a feasibility study, because we want to scope out just what it is they're going to try and do.
Yeah.
And then, you know, ideas on who one might actually tap as a consultant to do such a feasibility study. You know, Chrisanna and I were talking a little bit before the meeting, and I've talked about this with some other folks. A lot of the universe of consultants has really dwindled down. You know, there's fewer and fewer people who do consulting work in whatever the field is, and it's actually, you know, as people retire or get paid positions with firms, it's kind of hard to find folks. So we'll have to really try and figure out how we manage that as well. So that's
You would hope that with the building department and all the work that they've done in the last, you know, I mean, like 5 years, I think, but perhaps that the due diligence could be, some of it is, or a lot of it is already done. So, you know, hopefully that could help us, but I know
Yeah.
it's looking at it completely differently in terms of housing, so.
yeah.
But, you know, lot of documentation out there already
Yeah,
just from that
yeah.
study. So
Yeah,
just finding the person to do it.
yes.
So, right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. And then, okay, so we're on a draft CPA application.
Yes, it's probably going to be virtual. Again, this is, man, Nikki knows the meetings to miss. So mark your calendars, please. Thursday, November 17 at 7 p.m. Will be almost definitely be virtual. I don't think this is going to be one that's in person. The Community Preservation Committee will be considering our near final draft application, which I'm in the process of writing, for CPA funds. Again, it's going to be our 10% ask of roughly whatever the 200,000 is or something. And as you may remember from some previous CPA meetings, it's always helpful to have members of the public, the volunteers of that are the board attend as a show of support to answer questions and such. They always do appreciate it when boards attend these meetings and speak on behalf of the application. So if you are available that evening, that would be helpful.
Wayne, does it start at 7 p.m. or do they give you a? Is that
It
our
starts
time?
at 7 and then we would go through.
Okay.
And the agenda is, hold that thought. I just drafted the agenda actually. Yeah, after the minutes, the Affordable Housing Trust would be the first thing on the agenda, assuming it gets posted as drafted. So it should be fairly close to 7 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, so I happened to skip over the action plan, but I think that we can, that's the big ticket item here. So we'll get back to that. And were you going to add in?
I
Oh, okay.
can, yeah, let me
Yep, when you're
finish. Okay. And I'm promoting Joanne and Lori as panelists. Okay. Joanne went and Lori went. Great.
Hi, Joanne. Hi, Lori. I'm Amy Rodriguez, the clerk, acting for the chair tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Okay, so we all should have the draft action plan. Thanks, Wayne, for sending it last week.
Absolutely, and thanks
For the
to
time.
Joanne for being a lead drafter of it.
Okay, Lori or Joanne, do you want to give us a synopsis of it, or does anyone have questions about it? How do we want to proceed? What would be the best way?
Go ahead, Joanne. I'll leave it to you.
Okay, sure. Wayne, do you want to kind of set this up? I'm not sure how much the
Yeah, I
committee
can
knows.
try a little
Yeah.
bit.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Wayne.
let me get back to where I'm going. So, we did the housing production plan and got that accepted by the state. And so we're current on that. And then as the Affordable Housing Trust has done a couple of times in the past, it could be helpful to have a somewhat brief but focused action plan for the next 5 years that would support our budget asks to the CPA and help guide our work in a fairly specific way. What actual projects or programs are we hoping to pursue? How do we scope out what that might look like? What might they cost? And really sort of help us focus on what our work will be. And this can be quite specific, a specific project. It can be a little bit general. Being in a state of readiness for a certain kind of opportunity should it come along, because there are several different properties that, could happen in this world. It could be continuing some things we're already doing. We have partnered quite successfully with Habitat for Humanity, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so as we can find parcels. There's some programs we may want to revisit as to whether they're feasible, or if we need to rework them or redirect funds to something a little bit similar, but more workable. So to that end, Joanne and Old Colony Planning Council have put together this draft action plan as sort of a foundation for us to really start talking about it. This is some of the stuff we've been talking about or have been doing. Are there other items we want to add, things we want to maybe remove, more detail to fill in? The budget part, I think, can actually happen a little bit towards the end of the process. Those are numbers we can worry about a bit later. So that's sort of the background, and how do we sort of go through this? Do we talk general? Do we go through the draft plan itself? I don't have a lot of experience guiding productive conversations, and I don't know if Joanne does.
Sure. Thanks, Wayne, for setting that up. I think the most efficient use of everyone's time this evening would be to skip over through to page 6. So while you look for page 6, just prior to that page is just general information about the trust, what the housing production plan is that Wayne just mentioned, the purpose of this action plan, what an affordable housing trust in Easton actually does and is, and then some financial information and info about the Board of Trustees. So that's kind of all background info. And then there's a section that lists some accomplishments of the trust over the last 5 or so years since the previous action plan timeline. So I think what would be most effective probably is to look at, starting on page 6, right now the action plan identifies 5-year goals for the trust. And this is kind of an interesting section. Sometimes these goals are very specific in communities, sometimes they're very vague. You guys are a volunteer-led organization in your community where you pretty much do what you say in your title, right? Your goal is to promote and advance affordable housing in the community. So these are the goals that have been suggested to kind of help achieve that. The first one is exactly that, increasing availability of affordable housing options for older adults and families. The second goal is to continue to promote the diversification of housing choices. And the third goal is to continue to increase understanding of the need for housing that is affordable and to raise awareness of existing assistance programs. So it kind of covers both, on the one hand, the work that the trust does to actually create affordable housing in your community. And then on the other hand, the advocacy work that is also done to promote additional resources that are available to residents, as well as encourage other things that are happening in the community to kind of align with priorities of the trust as well too. So if these sound okay, that's fabulous. But I would welcome any comments or suggestions about how you guys feel about these goals. Do you think these are pretty much covering the next 5 years and how you kind of see the trust advancing? Or is there something missing? Or do you just want to focus on one specific goal and not do advocacy, for example? Once that decision is made, once you're clear on what the goals are, then we can dive into the priority initiatives, which kind of are the very specific, or not so specific, they can be vague as well, action items that you want to do to help advance the goals. So does anybody have any thoughts on any of the 3 goals on pages 6 or 7? Do you feel like that captures everything that trust is about over the next 5 years? Is
So
it
the only
Krizan?
thing is-
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the actual representative to the Affordable Housing Trust from the Housing Authority.
Mhm.
And the only thing that I am seeing, and I would believe it would potentially be a goal, maybe it's more of an initiative, but I know over the years we've provided preservation funds to the Housing Authority. And I don't think we're really talking at all to a preservation factor. So I just didn't know if we wanted to kind of make note of that. So it's listed here at some point in some way.
Suzanne, can you tell me a little bit more? Preservation funds, you mean support for like maintenance and operations of existing properties or something else?
Yeah, it's, I know they have applied actually to the Community Preservation Committee directly. On occasion, it does end up coming through us as well. There's been, it's generally not maintenance, it's more capital improvement type of things that are preserving. And it might be a housing authority unit, but there's also other affordable housing we've done in the town that we might need to look at. We want to preserve these affordable units going forward.
Mhm. Wayne, that touches a little bit upon what you and I were chatting about with small grants for income restricted properties. Do you know, does Easton have, it sounds like Easton does have a history of the trust contributing to preservation. Or
Sort of,
not.
yeah, I think maybe a way of capturing that would be what Chrisanne was saying towards the end there is, and it may not be a standalone goal, but it may mix into promoting diversification or something like that, of preserving affordable units, of helping with the preservation of existing affordable units. And then that could capture supporting housing authority applications to the CPA for funding there. And it could also be this home repair grant for affordable units as they change hands that we've just talked about. It sort of covered the whole gamut of giving the trust a role in helping affordable places stay affordable.
Mhm. So does the board think that we can wrap that up into goal 1? So right now it's increase availability of affordable housing options. What we could do here is increase availability of affordable housing options for older adults and families and maintain
Existing and help maintain
existing and help maintain existing. Yeah. Is everybody happy with wrapping that up into goal 1? Yeah, looks like it. Okay, that was easy. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions on the 3 goals?
One sort of thing I do have is if we keep goal 3, that's going to require some more specific action items to be carried out by trust board members. The sort of education and advocacy part is something that a town employee can't really do terribly effectively. So I think it would require some more public events and public outreach initiatives and such. And then it would be, I'm not really sure how to thread that needle because I don't think the trust is really going to be offering a lot of ongoing support programs. We tend to be a little more construction oriented, I think, in a lot of things that we do. But this might require or encourage trust members to, say, be more involved with the planning board and attend those meetings, might do more select board presentations, more features placed in the local paper, things on the town website, taking a somewhat active role in the MBTA community zoning that's going to be a thing the town will be considering in the coming calendar year. So just to sort of point out that if we keep goal 3, it's gonna increase the time commitment for trust board members.
Looking through some of the previous town annual reports, I can't remember exactly when it was, but at one point there was a resource fair around affordable housing that was held maybe 6 or so years ago. That was one thing that happened. No?
The only reason you come to a housing resource fair is because you can get an affordable housing unit when you're there.
Mhm.
That is the only reason anyone ever came to this.
Okay, that was one outreach initiative. Wayne mentioned the website. Easton's website currently does have some information on there, but could probably use a little bit of extra love with some of the newer programs and resources that are available. There was also, I found a pamphlet, like a little leaflet with some information. I don't know how old that is. Wayne, if you have any
It's
sense if
reasonably
that's been around
recent.
for a while. Okay, it looks pretty accurate still.
Yeah, something also to factor into this is the town has hired a benefits navigator, Tracy Levine, and she works out of, Council on Aging, and she's based, for folks who know it, physically at Frothingham Hall. And she is a point of contact for people who need one-on-one assistance and help in navigating benefits and finding housing. So the town actually does have that role. And it's not a thing that's done by the trust, it's done by the town itself. And I think it lives, like under Board of Health, I think, is how it fits into the hierarchy as you trace it back up. But she's really great, really effective, and super helpful. So we may want to maybe gesture to that fact in this, that to point out that it does exist, or in our communications and outreach, point out that that does exist.
Yeah, I mean, once we move on to the priority initiatives, you'll see priority initiative 6 on page 9 is really the one that kind of tries to address goal 3. And it talks about specifically some of the stuff that can be done. But it, Wayne's right, it takes additional time from trust members.
Yeah.
So if the trust board feels like that is probably unrealistic, then it's better to just cut that goal and the associated initiatives and just keep it very focused on, what is actually feasible and achievable over the next 5 years.
So I just want to suggest, I don't know if it's anything we want to consider, but I know with housing authorities, we have gone to the level of setting aside money for essentially marketing, that you hire someone that actually does some sort of professional, sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's information that can be disseminated, something that gives us a better presence on the website. So if we were to allocate some funds and put somebody literally in charge of doing something more active marketing that promotes what we do, explains what we do, who we are, what we've done, because it's not necessary. It'd be great if the board could do that, but it may not be within everybody's ability to tag that on to what they've got going on in their lives. So it's just an option. I just know that they've done some very nice things for us, the companies we've hired, and it's actually proven to be a pretty good use of money.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I don't know that CPA funds could be used for that. There are some other funds that we've gotten from legal settlements and stuff that might be. But I want to think about what we could do that would be durable and useful and reusable if we were to do something like that. That wouldn't be, me or us telling someone what to do and then paying them to do it so much. Making sure that there's a real value add to that. And I'm trying to think of what that would materially look like for the trust.
I was under the impression that the town wouldn't handle that, no?
I mean, we sort of do, we have, the website, the flyer, we could probably put out some more stuff on ECAT. That's another thing we could do. We could have, the trust board members give presentations and talks and stuff on ECAT. One thing that, and this sort of ties back to the, the housing fair. Everyone's looking for like the specific thing, I have a specific problem and how can you help me with my specific problem, whether it's finding a specific affordable housing unit or help with my rent or something. So if we don't have anything, if we don't have the bandwidth or something specifically to offer, I want to be sort of mindful on how we put information out there, that maybe helps support, the benefits coordinator, the benefits navigator, that more prominently features the resources available, that sort of thing.
So where does that leave us with goal 3 then? Does it sound like folks want to keep it and just be very intentional about what's included in the priority initiative so that it's a very, very, very easy lift for the board and the town? Or would you prefer to just cut it?
We can do this.
Yeah, I'll just, I really don't like the thought of cutting it completely, right? It just doesn't feel right. But I think what you said about keeping it in, but being very intentional about what we can do and what we get out of it, right? And if I was thinking that if the homebuyer assistance program, the grant, was still active, like that's something to offer and be able to really market that. But right now that's kind of, we've talked about it's just not feasible right now, even though it's still out there. It's just, so yeah, that's my thought, is keeping it, but trying to just go through each of those priorities and say, okay, we do this that way. I mean, the annual update, that can be done, but maybe I haven't seen the brochure, but I'm happy to look at it and see if it's updated. And I don't even know who has the document, but
Like
to
Tracy
receive
does.
it. But that could be done. So yeah, that's my thought on that. Anybody else?
I feel similarly to what you stated, Amy, that not having it feels wrong. And I think the struggle I'm having is defining it right at this moment. But if we don't have it, if we have it, we can start thinking about how we measure it and define it, and it can create a better structure for knocking it out of the park in future years. It just puts some intentionality, because I think it's, as part of our work, we should always be thinking about what opportunities there are for advocacy. And I was thinking about this differently from, advocating for the programs versus just in general, like continuing, one of the things I try to do as a select board member is to remind folks that like affordable housing is not this bad thing. It's not this scary thing, like just spreading general education about the things that we see and hear talked about in the world and how those things are often quite wrong. So I was thinking about advocacy that way and how, the roles we all play in that. The other prong of that is the programs and promoting and being, so I think we can do those things, and it can be, but it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. It can be, I don't want to call it an aspirational goal. It's more of kind of a benchmarking exercise for us this year. Does this make sense, or am I just rambling?
Yeah.
But I
Yes.
think it's very important, and I think it would be a loss for us to remove it, but I don't have an answer yet on how to define it, because I think maybe part of this is us getting to that state over this coming year of saying, okay, or this period of time, 5 years, whatever it is, of saying, here's how we're thinking about this and gonna do it better.
Mhm.
Okay, so it sounds, is there anybody who has a different opinion? Okay, so it sounds like we're going to leave those 3 goals in. Is there anything missing? Or are we happy with those 3? Everybody feeling good so far? All right. Cool. So on to priority initiatives. So this is really the meat of the document. And there is no standard for how to present this in an action plan. If you read action plans from other communities, some of them are incredibly specific. Some of them are so vague that you're kind of wondering what it's even trying to say. So at the moment, it's kind of written a little bit in between with some specificity to provide a little bit of guidance, but still enough vagueness to kind of allow for flexibility and kind of maneuvering when we get on to talk about sort of private development, for example, things like that. So the way that these are formatted, basically you've got your priority, you've got a short description of it, and then it lists the time frame, which could be, you know, throughout the next 5 years or a specific year. Again, the time frame could be entirely eliminated, and it could just say, you know, over the next 5 years, the trust intends to pursue these initiatives. If you want to maintain complete flexibility about it, you can also put, you know, in the first 6 months, we want to do X, and in the first, you know, 10 months, we want to do Y. So that's kind of up to you guys to guide how specific you want to be. The responsible part of that, those are the folks that have to be involved in order to make this happen. It's not exhaustive. It pretty much just is kind of, you know, the tip of the iceberg in terms of getting that initiative done. Again, that's something that could be completely cut out of this if you'd like to. It could also something that could be, you know, written a lot more about if you wanted to. And then the cost estimate. So the cost estimate really is something that between Wayne, Lori, and I, we kind of ballpark just based on our professional experiences and what we, you know, what the community has done in the past and what other communities have done to try and kind of give a rough estimation for what that initiative might cost the trust going forward. And in some cases, it costs nothing at all other than staff time or board member time. So I think probably I want to begin by just asking in general with these initiatives, does anybody have any comments or suggestions on kind of just the overall layout of them? Is there anything missing in terms of information that you want to see under an initiative? Is there anything of concern generally about the presentation, or are you kind of happy to stick within that kind of template for each initiative? No? Okay, so we're looking good. So the first, oh, and the other thing that I should mention is the order of these initiatives isn't, in my mind, I've kind of listed them in order of sort of biggest impact / feasibility. However, you could definitely change the order of these as well too if you want to, or even make it very clear at the opening that these aren't listed in any specific order of priority. They're all just equally a priority too. So that's just something to think about as we go through them as well too. So priority initiative 1 is to continue to fund staff support for the trust. So Wayne is pretty crucial to keeping things going. So that's, you know, priority initiative number 1 at the top. There is just a little simple description about some of the stuff that Wayne works on. Wayne, you know, I don't know all the depths of the amazingness that you do in your community, so we can certainly add to that or fix anything that I might have gotten wrong. I wasn't entirely clear either on the responsibility of that. I don't know if you report directly to the town administrator, so like we can change the responsible section as well too. And then the cost estimate was based on some really old information that I found in the annual report. So we can update that later down the line as well too. Is there anybody who has any comments on that priority initiative number 1? No, seems like a pretty good use of cash to me. Priority initiative number 2. So this relates to the MBTA community zoning that's recently come out. So the second priority is to ensure more housing that is affordable for seniors and families is among the outcomes of implementation of the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. Wayne and I talked a little bit about this on our calls. The new MBTA community zoning rule is actually probably one of the biggest opportunities communities have to boost affordable housing in their communities. So finding ways to kind of advocate for affordable housing within that is super important. So the paragraph explains a little bit about the changes to the Zoning Act, and then describes what the town has been doing. So you guys are intending as a community to comply. There is an implementation review team that has been going through that whole process, looking at the ins and outs of that zoning requirement, what that means for the community, and asking lots of questions and getting really, really involved. So the suggestion here is that the trust would work with that implementation team to ensure that more housing that's affordable for seniors and families is actually represented among those discussions and included as part of the solution and implementation of that zoning. That is pretty vague. So I think Wayne mentioned, there could be a possibility for a trust member to actually actively participate in that review team. It could be simply, every couple months under Wayne's guidance, the trust writes a letter to the team, just advocating for the inclusion of affordable housing. This could play out in a million different ways. Wayne, I'm kind of throwing you under the bus here, but probably under your guidance, because you're probably, I'm guessing, very
I
heavily
have a few
involved.
thoughts. We can maybe
Yep,
edit this
go
in
for it.
real time if that's useful.
Yep.
For the responsible folks, I'd put in the planning board and the select board, and probably the select board. The select board it's really a select board. It's within the select board directive, and the planning board is working on the implementation. And then Nikki is on that implementation review team. So the chair of the trust was on the meetings, and they've been they're in suspension at the moment until it are likely to reconvene in the next few months as the planning board really picks it up and starts looking at how it can be implemented. So I think the role for the trust would be being closely involved with the planning board. And that again is sort of a trust board member ask and task, is to show up at the planning board meetings where these are discussed and really be an observer, be part of the conversation where appropriate, ensure that affordable units, the maximum affordability possible is in the planning. So I think that's really where the trust could be most useful, is being at these planning board meetings and making sure that happens. And then there's also, and this ties back to goal 3, the advocacy. Everyone has social networks and they know people, and I'm sure folks talk to friends, family, neighbors, helping educate folks about it, answering questions about it. Hopefully it will get to a positive point where we have a really good proposal to bring to town meeting, and making sure that there's the support there to have it happen. So I think the trust's role is showing up as board members to the planning board meetings where this is discussed, and to advocate for its support in the general public and at town meeting.
Do folks feel like that's a reasonable ask? Any other comments or questions about that priority initiative?
I just had a question about the time frame. anyone have, so they're in suspension, but probably pick it up in the next couple months. We have it as fiscal years 23 to 25. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Lori, do you know the latest on Wayne? Go for it.
Where the idea is, so there's, it's really complicated. I've been living and breathing it rather a lot. If any board members want to have a one-on-one conversation, I'm not in tomorrow, but I'm back next week. Give me a call and I can monologue at you for as long as you'll put up with me. The concept is, so there's sort of statutory requirements depending on what sort of town you are. Easton is an adjacent community. And our deadline, should we choose to implement this, would be bring it to town meeting for spring of 2024. So do the planning and outreach and zoning overlay drafting and all the analysis and, you know, the fine tuning of it for next year, next calendar year, to then get, you know, to have your public meetings and your required, you know, publicly noticed planning board hearings, and, you know, get the warrant done by, you know, towards the end of the year over the winter and get teed up for May 2024. So this is a next year project and it'll last about a year, year and a half.
Thanks, Wayne.
Great. Okay. Any other comments on initiative 2? What we were just chatting about? No, sounds good. Okay. Initiative 3. So this was talked about a little bit early on in your meeting this evening. Priority initiative 3 is to take advantage of the housing potential of surplus town properties. I know that there are a lot of moving pieces in Easton at the moment, studies being done that haven't yet come to a conclusion. So this is presented rather vaguely here. And it probably is best left rather vague until further information from those other things that are happening kind of, you know, pans out. But certainly, I think the intention for the trust to contract with a consultant to undertake an affordable housing feasibility study of surplus town properties once they're identified would probably be a good use of trust money. The scope of such a study could be defined by the trust when that time comes. I don't think that level of detail really needs to be put in here. Potential properties, as an example, are listed in bullets here, ranging from the DPW to the center school and Moreau Hall. We can certainly add to that list if there are other properties that you really think should be on the radar and therefore listed here. We can take a few of them off if there are concerns around them. As Wayne mentioned earlier, there are certainly some limitations to some of these properties, like Frothingham Hall, historic building. There's going to be certain things that you can and cannot do with it. Center School, a lot of wetland, wet area in that location too. So again, some limitations, but your feasibility study for those properties could look at those limitations as well as part of the scope. So it's been left here pretty vaguely, but the idea here is that once the community is at a point where surplus properties are pretty well defined over the next, you know, several years, then the trust could look at those properties, hire somebody to kind of scope them out, and then hopefully that consultant would produce some recommendations for how the trust could then continue to work with those properties to increase affordable housing in the community. So is that generally a vague enough but detailed enough initiative for the plan? Does everybody kind of feel comfortable with that?
I do, with a couple caveats about the properties identified.
Mhm.
And I was noodling around and I did an update to a thing and I cannot find the update to the thing that I did. And I'm a little annoyed about that. Bay Road, there's the water department that has an historic school on it, but a fair amount of land behind it. And I think there's also a fire station next door.
Mhm.
But the water department, I believe, might actually move to whatever a new DPW facility is. So we'd have a neat old historic school building and a surprising amount of acreage behind it. That might be in play.
Mhm.
So.
And that is
Yeah,
does
well,
not include the fire station.
correct. I think that fire
Separate.
station, they're keeping that one
Okay.
if they do that, yeah. But I would just put like Bay Road Water Department.
Mhm.
I did a whole little thing and found the address and the acreage and now I can't find it.
Okay, you can send it to me later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Center School and Moreau Hall, they are quite likely to not be in the mix. There's a very good chance that Moreau Hall is going back to Stonehill. And that Center School would be going to the YMCA. Possibly,
Okay.
I mean, pending town meeting votes and funding and, it's all very, very conditional, but
So shall we remove those two from the list then? Do we feel
I'm
comfortable
not
enough
sure,
to
do
do
we
that? Or
like have them as a secondary, bullet point pot and, have it as possibly, these two, if,
yeah, I mean, right now they're all listed as potential properties to be included in the study.
yeah, maybe make them the last two and with little asterisks,
Mhm.
something like that. Because if we're going to get specific about properties we're looking for, and of course, this is not the final action plan that's going to go out in front of the world. And I'm sure after town meeting and the municipal building committee comes out with its preferred, alternative and stuff, we'll have a clearer sense of what the possibility set is. So we can refine it from there. But yeah, we should probably be extra conditional about Center School and Moreau Hall because there's a very good chance that they're not actually going to be in our possibility set.
Okay. And on that note, with the timeline, so at the moment, so will most of these decisions around the surplus properties kind of shake out in 2023, so that when 2024 rolls around is probably when the study of these identified properties could take place, or at least be procured for? Or is that ambitious?
I think it should be ambitious. And Jen, again, I'm sorry to rely on you. Because what is the flow here, right? It goes to town meeting for, should we get the preferred alternative? Then there's a town meeting vote, and I think that's next May. Is that the idea?
For the municipal
For the
facilities?
debt exclusion for the, yeah.
Yeah,
should we-
they already have a recommendation that they're putting forth for the Gill properties. That's
Right.
that's the recommendation at this point. And yes, that'll go forth for, I think,
And
next.
then I think there's also a
bring it
vote for the debt exclusion.
There's a
right?
vote for the debt exclusion, yes. That would have to be off cycle, special vote. I
Yeah, and that's over the summer, I think.
think that's the timeline. We're going to
Yeah.
start having numbers in the
Right.
coming months. That's kind of the next step, is starting to.
There's a whole section of the website actually that lays it out.
Mhm.
But so I think that's the timeline for the town to know what it will actually be doing. It may not go well at town meeting, it may not go well at the vote.
Right.
It's a significant ask. It's a very necessary one, but it's not a small lift for the town. But as part of that, it might be prudent for, I don't want the trust like waste money, but I think part of the whole putting together a disposition package would be influenced by what you're disposing of the properties for. So I think it would be more effective for the trust to have a meaningful contribution while that's all being discussed and considered, so that the disposition can be shaped with that in mind. So rather than wait until they're all done and then start our process, we should have something ready to, to put out there by spring, possibly, right? By the May town meeting vote, if not earlier. So that as we're really putting together what a disposition looks like, right? Because that's going to be one of the questions. Well, can we sell these properties for maximum dollar amount to reduce the public ask? Is something to think about. And so then there's the other public good of, can we use these public properties at below market to address our housing needs? So having a meaningful conversation about that, I think, would be helped by having some sort of a feasibility study to help as an advocacy and informational tool, which is a long-winded way of saying maybe sooner rather than later. Maybe we'd be looking at hiring a consultant and getting this done over the winter.
Yep. So it sounds like fiscal year 23, basically, or
Yeah.
fiscal year. Yep, fiscal year 23. Okay. Any other comments on that? So I'll add the Bay Road Water Department to the list. We'll move Frothingham and Center School down to the bottom with an asterisk.
Moreau and Center, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Moreau. Yes, that's what I wrote, but that's not what I said. Thank you. Anything else on that one? Okay, on to the next one. So priority initiative 4. So this one's a little trickier. It's essentially the same thing as the town properties one, but here you're talking about using private property. So it's really about deciding carefully what can be specifically identified to the advantage of, the trust's goals, and what should be presented more vaguely, because there are a lot of conversations that yet have to happen, basically. So priority initiative 4 is that the trust would continue to look out for private properties that have redevelopment potential with private property owners, to develop win-win plans that include housing that is affordable for seniors and families. So it talks a little bit about the YMCA as a historic factory with potential, for example, should the Y decide to move to another location. The site could be redeveloped with Beacon Properties, who are the owner developers of Shovelworks, which is a great success story for the community. The narrative also mentions Crowfoot Gear as a historic factory building that's in poor condition that could be redeveloped for mixed income housing. Crowfoot Gear is actually a property right now that Old Colony Planning Council is looking to get some EPA money to look at a cleanup project, since it's identified as a brownfield. So we're talking to Easton's planning department about that. And then also there are, of course, several strip malls throughout town that are underutilized. Could those perhaps be encouraged to redevelop as mixed use with some affordable housing incorporated into that? So it's a pretty vague strategy that's in here that essentially, when you boil it down, it says that the trust will always be on the lookout for opportunities to work with private developers. And how that shakes out, I think, kind of depends on what the opportunities are as they kind of come into play within the community. Of course, if there's more specifics that you guys, think that, can be included at this point, certainly that can be done. The time frame for this right now is just remains as ongoing throughout the next 5 years, because again, it's all about being ready when an opportunity presents itself. Any comments or suggestions on that? Wayne, anything else to add?
I might revise the language a little bit. So should the Y decide to move to another location, the site could perhaps be redeveloped. This similar to the abutting Shovelworks property. Comma, similar to the abutting Shovelworks property for senior and or family affordable housing, and just remove Beacon Communities. I don't want to necessarily put a specific owner or developer on the spot.
Yeah.
And then maybe a sentence at the end, also look for smaller parcels that could be suitable for affordable single family home development. Yeah, I'm looking at our successful partnership over the past several years with South Shore Habitat for Humanity. They do such great work. Everybody loves them. They're a joy to work with. And if we can find parcels that work for them, that is
Yeah, are
absolutely.
there any of those left in Easton?
We
hard to
have
find.
pulled so many rabbits out of the hat to find developable land.
Mm,
But maybe we can pull a few more. Who knows?
absolutely.
Wayne, can you also add the strip malls that are on the guys? Can you add just in detail some of them?
I wouldn't want to put specific ones on here.
Mhm.
It's, I think, good to be a little vague about things because these are sort of targets of opportunity. And the financing and ownership can get very complex and move in very unexpected directions. But driving around town, you will see any number of properties that that could be redeveloped. And then there's also a larger conversation that the older strip malls are places with low rents that support really pretty interesting independent businesses that you would not necessarily get in a newer property. So you also want to balance that out. So I think it's just being aware of the opportunities and as things shift, being ready to maybe insert ourselves into the conversation. Or should we find ourselves, and this is purely speculative and it's not really appropriate to be put in here, certainly not in writing, but should we find ourselves building a relationship with a nonprofit developer who builds properties at scale of, say 20, 10 or 20 units or something? Gosh, wouldn't it be interesting if we knew of someone wanting to sell an old strip mall and, B'nai B'rith develops it or something, I think that could get pretty interesting. So maybe keep it a little vague as to the exact ones we're thinking about.
Any other thoughts on initiative 4? Okay, moving on to the next one, priority initiative 5. So this initiative is about exploring the potential for joint open space and affordable housing projects. So the narrative again is relatively vague. At the end lists a couple of possible areas that could be explored. Again, there can be discussion about whether or not to include these if we think any of them might be sensitive. But the idea here is to encourage looking at open space as not necessarily being in conflict with affordable housing goals. That it can be a win-win situation for both conservation as well as for affordable housing. The development of many of these sites is often restricted due to there being wetlands on site, or there might be some historic value. So everything is going to be very site specific, but the point here really is just to prioritize and identify as an opportunity that there can be some open space and affordable housing joint initiatives where 1, 2, 5, 6 units could maybe be integrated into an open space area so that the conservation value remains, but there's also a couple of additional affordable housing units added to the community. And of course, in order to implement this, the trust would have to work collaboratively with the Community Preservation Committee, the Conservation Commission, quite a lot of other organizations and bodies in town. And the possible areas that are listed here are Langwater, Marshall Farm, Clover Valley Farm, and Simpson Springs. Wayne, do you want to talk about a little bit more about this one?
I think you really summed it up.
Okay, great.
I pulled those properties out of the CPA action plan as the big open space priority parcels in the town. Which, should they ever become available, have been identified as, yes, the town is very interested in trying to conserve them. Which could be a pretty expensive ask, but they are, anyone who knows them, they're very large, very scenic, and very important. The last really remaining open space blocks in town. And that said, there has been discussion in the past, and I think these could provide an opportunity to have, as Joanne said, small little developments. Why not a cul-de-sac with 6 houses on it? In the woods at one side. Why not a assisted living facility on 10 acres of 150-acre property? We could bring some funding to that. We could address some other goals. We could still preserve the open space and scenic and historic and conservation values. And just making sure that affordable housing is in the consideration mix, should any of these open space properties come to the fore.
Anyone have any questions or thoughts on that one? So this is also it's a little bit of a wait and see on these things. But the point is just to make that note that those two things aren't at odds with one another, but can actually go hand in hand if the opportunities arise. All right, priority initiative 6. So this is the one that's more about the advocacy that we had talked about previously. So to continue to provide education about affordable housing issues, programs, and assistance, as well as improve community understanding of the Trust's work. So right now there are, 5 or 6 bullets here, specifically about what the committee can do under this initiative. So the annual update that's included in the town's annual report, Wayne, I'm guessing that's something that you slot in there every year? Yep, so that's certainly something that can stay in there because it has to be in there anyway. So that's an easy box to tick. Regular updates to the select board and the community preservation committee and other boards and committees as needed. So regular updates to the select board is pretty much ticked too, because I see that Jennifer is on this committee, so she can pass along information pretty easily. Wayne mentioned that the chair is part of the review committee for the MBTA communities. And there was a little talk about trust members also attending planning meetings related to the MBTA community zoning as those arise. So that sounds to me like probably is a pretty, yep, Wayne?
It is, and
Pretty
one
easy to
thing
tick.
that we've gotten questions on, or we have done in the past, and then COVID changed everything, and we're trying to get a little bit back to it. What the trust has done, really well received, sort of informational updates with a modest slide deck of stuff we have done or are working on. And it's been, me, Nikki, a few other board members as available, who show up about once a year to the select board. And we have an agenda spot, and it's like, here we are, and here's what we're doing, and isn't it great? And the chair of the Community Preservation Committee, who is a former select board member, has said he'd love to have that happen for the CPC as well. So I think having these intentional, sort of scripted with promotional materials, presentations to these televised meetings, and actually scheduling them to happen at least once a year, I think would be really helpful. And then I think an important longer term goal, and I don't know how to work it in here, and we have touched on it for MBTA communities, and definitely working with the planning board and board members showing up to planning board meetings to really be part of that. Where the planning board does its work and where the Board of Appeals does its work, especially the planning board, is a real opportunity to get affordable housing in the mix, and some closer attention from the Affordable Housing Trust board to the planning board, I think could be a helpful thing. Are there ever any vacancies to the planning board that Affordable Housing Trust board members or advocates might be interested in applying for? Would trust board members be interested in attending periodically to just keep maintaining that volunteer resident relationship. These are things to consider, not necessarily as a bullet point here, or maybe as a very general bullet point, trust board members try to attend planning board meetings or something. As an aside.
Okay. The next one is about, now this one might be a little bit of a list. So posting of information to the town crier newsletter and to town social media pages. So that really requires sort of the intentional development of specific messages. It's probably pretty easy to put something in the town crier if it's like a new first-time home buyers program that's been released by the state, or some other kind of bigger announcement from another organization that probably your benefits coordinator, I imagine, would be really attuned to. But the social media stuff is definitely a heavier lift, and you'd have to think about what you want your messages to be and what kind of information is most useful and how that fits with the other things that are happening in town that are being put on social media. So just based on our previous conversation, I'm kind of thinking maybe chopping this one. But again, how do you guys feel about that? Wayne, I see you kind of nodding, mulling. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the town crier newsletter and social media and the trust web pages, the town website. Don't remove them, but reduce the frequency or something. Because you did touch on one thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be stuff the trust is doing. It can be featured, updates or information that might be of interest to folks that other groups are doing. And so we could, keep an eye out for that. But for the town webpage, the town crier newsletter, they tend to be really just town oriented. So for us to have regular updates, it needs to be stuff the trust is actually doing, which means we need something concrete to anchor that on. And our projects tend to be nothing. Oh my gosh, look at that. Nothing. So there's only, I think, so many inflection points we can create from these long-term projects. But yeah, we should definitely have a bit more on there. We can do that by recycling statewide information or larger groups findings and reports, and that can help inform. And that's where the social media comes in, right? Every time there's the housing crisis shows up, we can stick that out there on the town's Twitter deck or something. So
So should we leave it as posting of information in the town crier newsletter and town social media pages as and when appropriate?
Posting of information in the town crier newsletter, town social media pages, and updates to the trust's web pages and town's website. Semi-regularly or more frequently than we do now. Something like that.
Should we just leave it as regularly?
Regularly, yeah.
Regularly.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. That moves us to annual updates to the trust brochure and year-round dissemination at points of public contact. That's probably a relatively easy lift. There's not too much information in that brochure, I think, that changes all that often.
I think Tracy kind of does that. Yeah, she updated. Yeah.
Awesome. And then dissemination at points of public contact. I imagine it's probably already in places throughout the community.
At her office at the Council on Aging, we've got a little stack of them downstairs here at Town Hall.
Perfect. Okay, so we can leave that because it sounds like it's already happening. So that's another ticked one, which is great. And then this last one is, again, probably the most heavy of the list of all of them. So this would be the actual sort of proactive advocacy, publishing letters to the editor, putting out press releases as appropriate, doing interviews with reporters. It could be appearing on the local cable access channel to talk about some stuff. These things kind of take a little bit of time, both in terms of trying to strategically develop messages and then push them out and coordinate with folks. I imagine when you do the feasibility study and there are some results from that, some of this would probably naturally fall out of that anyway. Certainly being disseminated through the town channels, including social media and the prior. How do folks feel about that? Should we cut that bullet, or do we want to leave it in there and just say something like,
I would call it off completely. That's it.
yeah,
Yeah, get rid of it.
everybody good with that? Anybody agree? And also, just to note this as kind of a point of fact, just because you cut it out doesn't mean you can't do it in the future. So if you guys want to do it in the future, you could do it anyway.
In the future, yeah.
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 Yeah, I put out press releases periodically when the trust does stuff.
I imagine,
They
yeah.
do get picked up, yeah, so that is something I already do.
Right. Sure. Okay, now, is there anything missing that's low-hanging fruit that should be kind of added to that list based on our discussions previously, or do folks feel pretty comfortable with what's there now?
I'm comfortable with that.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to priority initiative 7. We're almost done, folks. 2 more to go. So priority initiative 7 is probably one that, Wayne, I'm going to hand this over to you to talk a little bit more about. Home buyer assistance with grant programs are, generally speaking, very public friendly. Lots of communities try to implement them. Actually implementing them is kind of a whole nother story, largely due to the costs now of housing and how small the budgets are of most affordable housing trusts like Easton's. So really, it's been left in here as a program certainly to consider, but the reality of it and the long-term feasibility is something that the trust may want to think about, and therefore possibly remove this as an initiative altogether. With the way that the market is going, you do one individual home buyer assistance grant and you kind of blow your budget. So that's all you can kind of do. So it's deciding as a trust, you know, where do you get the most bang for your buck? Is it in helping a family acquire a single family home and using your entire budget for that one thing? Or is it, for example, on, you know, trying to work with surplus housing in the town that might generate multiple units over the course of a few years, as opposed to just 1 or 2. So with that, Wayne, is there anything more that you want to say about that?
I would encourage the trust to think long and hard about officially canceling the program. We do get inquiries a couple a month, and it's never workable for the people who reach out to us. And, you know, as we've talked about in previous meetings, to really make it work, because you're affordable, you know, as it's summarized there, for the restricted affordable resale price versus the current market price, whether it be a house or a condo, you have to start giving north of $200,000 as your down payment grant to even begin to approach it actually working. And even if one were to do that, properties sell so incredibly quickly and they get bid up and they go over asking. It's really, really challenging.
There are programs that are available at the state level or through certain nonprofits that do try and assist first-time home buyers. So if this specific initiative was dropped, it could be that through your priority initiative 6 about providing education, you could point people to those other resources. So there's a one mortgage program that several dozen lenders offer across the state that helps low and moderate income first-time home buyers secure affordable mortgages. NeighborWork Housing Solutions offers some support for first-time home buyers. So it could be that the trust kind of pivots to point people in the direction of programs that are more feasible over the long term and more impactful than trying to run a program, you know, at the community level to be able to do it, you know, maybe once every 2 years or so. But it's up to you guys. I mean, some affordable housing trusts do spend all their money just on running this specific kind of program and don't really do much else. So it's all about what you think the priorities are.
Wayne, when was the last time we did actually award a grant?
Pre-COVID,
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago.
yeah.
And you say we get, you know, a couple inquiries each month. So how does that affect your time? You know, sometimes I feel like sometimes there was back and forth. You were, you know, you'd leave messages. I mean, there's definitely some work that needs to be done on your end. And so, you know, if it's out
It
there,
can be a time sink,
yeah,
to be honest. And yeah, I don't want to it's not about me, you know, but it can be a time sink. Income qualifying an applicant, you know, folks have to produce their, you know, the last 3 years of their tax returns. They have to produce about 5 months of their pay stubs for their multiple jobs. They have to produce about 5 months of their bank accounts and savings accounts and retirement accounts. And then I have to put together a bespoke spreadsheet, because it varies from, you know, person to person, how you can actually put all that information together and, you know, do an analysis to make sure they're income qualified. And quite often they're not.
yeah,
By the time I go through all that, or there's sort of discrepancies from one year to the next. And then, you know, so it's a lengthy process to do it. It also shows up, the information shows up in strange ways. You know, people send photos of documents and you have to turn them right side up and then try to stitch them together to, you know, something you can look at. So it, you know, it is pretty labor intensive.
yeah.
Mm.
I feel like we were on the fence before about that program and kind of held on to it, waiting for this kind of update. And if it's taking us away from doing things that are more impactful, then maybe it's time to let it go temporarily, even, or whatever, you
Mhm.
know, if we have the option to come back if the economy changes in a significant way. But I don't want to lead people down the path of doing all the legwork if it's
Mhm.
time for you, Wayne, that you're not doing other important things, and time for the people who are not pursuing opportunities we could be advocating for elsewhere.
Mhm.
That's what I feel terrible about, because we get folks, you know, we recently had a young couple with a couple of children, one of them special needs, who would not talk to me on the phone, but sent their application and all their backup documentation that they'd put together. And I went through and you know, and they were not actually income qualified. Or they were income qualified, in fact, but their income was lower than they thought it was. And there was absolutely no market rate unit in Easton for sale that they could have gotten
Hmm.
a grant. And
Program might just work better in other communities, and that number is probably dwindling because the cost of housing is skyrocketing everywhere, but
Yeah.
it's probably just really too hard here, right?
It is.
and I feel terrible for people who, you know, get excited or they put all this effort in
And then,
and, you know, put their personal details out there, which is, you know, really a thing. I feel very uncomfortable going through people's private finances. It's
Yeah.
frustrating, and for them as well.
yeah.
And, you know, we can't actually help them.
I like the suggestion though of thinking about just even aggregating the resources that are out there and pointing folks in the right direction of other things they can pursue. So it's a nice way to soften the, impact of having to walk away from this if we decide to do that. But then you'll have time and, the trade-off there is time back to do other things that are more impactful.
Yeah.
I would not mind really about the time, but the fact that, the way the market is going now, you can't qualify anybody, with that rate. So instead of wasting people's time and wasting our time, in fact, your time, Wayne, I think it's better to get rid of it completely. Just like you said, Jen, guide those people to the state, in fact. Okay.
Chrisanne, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so if we remove it, it can always be added, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this action plan is it's a guidance document. You guys can do whatever you want to do at any time if the opportunity arises or the market changes.
So it's just not feasible at this point in time and can be added in the future if things ever turn around.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Worked well for about a half dozen households for a couple of years. Overwhelmingly, single moms making in the high 50s. We got people some nice housing for it, and it's disappointing that we can't make it work anymore.
No.
So would you guys like to, so we'll remove it from the priority initiative section. Do you want it to just completely disappear from the action plan, or do you actually want a section in there about why it's being discontinued?
Nah. No, just get rid of it. Don't even mention it. Out there.
Everybody all right with that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, it is being struck. So that brings us to priority initiative 8, which is the last initiative that's being suggested, and that is to explore options for restarting a home small repairs grant program for income qualified owners. So Easton has tried to run such a program in the past. It has come up against some hurdles put in place by the Department of Revenue, who really see it as providing, increasing the value of a private property, using public funds to increase the value of private property. And so there are some implementation hurdles for this, but there might be some ways around it that Wayne can talk a little bit about more. But the purpose really of having that initiative in here is just to say that it's a program that the trust wants to do. It hasn't been able to do it in kind of the traditional way because of the Department of Revenue. However, the initiative specifically here is just to continue to explore ways that it could be alternatively delivered. So again, this could be cut completely, and it could just be something that, Wayne in his role with the community continues to investigate in the background. And if he finds a way to make it feasible, could always be added back onto the programming block. Or it can just remain in here so that people know that it is an actual priority for you guys on an ongoing basis. But right now, there's just no means to implement because of the state. Wayne, do you want to add anything to that?
Or do we want to replace it with the concept we were talking about earlier, the grant for affordable resales at point of sale to address significant, I always call it renewal, which is a bit of an obscure term, but maintenance and replacement needs. And that might have a similar, occupy a similar spot in the ecology that our old program did. And maybe we could replace this completely with that concept, And I don't know, Joanne, if you heard us talking earlier in the meeting before you were admitted as a panelist about what that program might look like. And this would be a grant program for maintenance needs identified by an inspection when a restricted affordable unit is being resold and has these outstanding needs, and it's meant to be for significant things like the roof, the septic, the windows, the kitchen, big ticket items that a new buyer may not be able to actually fund, but would allow us to keep a unit in a state of good repair and in circulation as an affordable unit.
How is it working in Randolph? I see you have something about Randolph. Joey Randolph is having it right now. Like
Oh, in
that's
Randolph?
using, yeah,
Randolph, yeah.
that's using the community development block grant to offer the zero interest home repair loans.
Which we don't have access to. We're not a community development block grant community. Because with community development block grant money, it doesn't have these Massachusetts Department of Revenue restrictions on it. So they have a little more flexibility, I think, in using that money. But we are not a community development block grant town. So we don't have those funds.
So if the trust had more money, for example, from lawsuits in the past or other sources beyond just the community preservation money, then those could potentially go towards something like this, but it's still tricky.
It is, because there's municipal affordable housing trusts have restrictions, even if it's not CPA funds, on what they can do. I actually found the PDF of the email from DOR that sort of goes through laboriously all these points, and it boils down to you have to have a income qualified household in a restricted affordable unit. Just period. To use housing trust funds, and certainly CPA funds, and I think also housing trust funds. I think they've changed the housing trust requirements since 2015.
So it sounds like a pretty far stretch to try and find a different way of implementing that program. So how do folks feel about cutting this and replacing it instead with the maintenance grant program?
I'm for that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, Chrisanne, I think you shook your head as well. Sound good to you? Yeah. Okay. So Wayne, I might come back to you with a little bit more about the wording for that specifically.
Of course, yeah. And something I wonder about, and this is, I don't know, and maybe this is like stick a little pin in it for later, or maybe a specific ask for Joanne, if you have any insight on this one. What about seniors? Is there a different, if someone is a senior or disabled, does that change what you can do with your CPA municipal affordable housing trust funds? Is it a different class? Because I seem to have it in my head, there's something that makes that a little more allowable than just random people.
I don't know anything. Yeah. Lori, do you know anything about that?
No? Okay.
No. That might be something, Wayne. So Easton, as I know you're aware, recently issued an age-friendly action plan, and housing was one of the components. That might be something to explore with the age-friendly committee as well, too, because I think
they
some
probably
of
would
these
have teased it out because that was such a thorough, comprehensive process.
Yeah, they didn't focus so much on the development of affordable units for the senior population, but there were other kind of aligning housing goals in there that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, even though I wrote it. Sorry about that, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll see if I can like noodle that a bit, because there might be something there, income qualified seniors or disabled folks, we might be able to do housing grants for them. I suspect not, but I can check.
So that brings us to the end of the initiatives that are in there right now. Is there anything that is missing that folks think should be in for the next 5 years?
I think the only thing, we always go back to DOR about this, the only thing is any type of rental assistance. And I just want to be clear, we haven't, DOR, I know, allowed emergency rental assistance through COVID, but that's done. There are no other thoughts or ideas or even, just any possibility of any type of rental assistance, right? Because it doesn't have the affordable restriction. So
I think it's allowed. I think we could do it, but there is a big administrative lift to doing it.
okay,
To how do you qualify folks? How do you do the payments? When we did the emergency grant, we contracted with a very experienced nonprofit to actually run it.
Yeah.
Because it was something I could not do.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of fair housing laws that you have to follow. And it's a very big and pretty sophisticated deal to
Okay.
actually start.
Yeah.
All right, so
Another
that's,
I'm
mhm.
sorry.
No, go, Wayne,
No
go
one
ahead.
wants to go home. I'm actually flying to Baltimore first thing tomorrow. So,
yeah,
something that I had been bandied about by some folks. I'm not sure how many folks on this call. I think a few. When a new subdivision, a new market rate subdivision goes in, would the trust buy an affordability restriction on a new market rate unit? But then it might be pretty expensive, right? I mean, what do they sell for? If
A
it
lot more
sells
in
for,
Easton.
they sell for a lot now. So we're probably back to the same home buyer assistance grant program problem. If we want to get a market rate single family house down to 225. Yeah,
You could change, give them a density bonus in exchange for the affordable units.
yeah. I think some of our
Site plan
zoning does
review.
do that. Yeah,
Mm.
I remember looking at, can we do that with the MBTA community zoning?
Mm.
Mm.
Um,
You can get density bonus, yes, in the MBTA.
yeah.
Yeah, that might be tough with just the cost of everything. I mean,
Yeah.
even rental assistance in Easton, rental units are so expensive
Yeah.
in Easton, everywhere really at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. Okay, yeah, that was a thought, but yeah, given the market rate cost, it's not really cost effective because we're looking at $250,000 per unit.
Mm. Any other thoughts? Wayne, any others? No. Okay, so that's me done for this evening. I will make the changes that we talked about this evening and send Wayne a revised draft probably sometime in the middle of next week-ish. So we can kind of finalize this. And then the step after that, Wayne, is will it come back to the board for final approval, or
Yeah, I imagine there'll be
probably
another little bit of back and forth on getting the final one, and then we still have to fill in like the dollars.
Yeah, the money part, the fun stuff. Yeah.
And how do and the feasibility of like what are we actually asking for if it's above our 10%. And as a bit of a reminder, of course, the CPC is in no way obligated to allocate that 10% to the Affordable Housing Trust. They just, every year they do when we ask, except for a couple of years. So, yeah, actually teasing out the numbers and seeing if there's going to be a higher than 200 ask in a year, I think would be interesting to see. But yeah, so I'll look for the redraft, have a few more comments, and then I believe we would take the final thing to the trust for adoption at a future meeting. Probably the next
Super.
one. Yeah.
That sounds great. Does anybody have any final questions or thoughts about the action plan? No? Right.
No, but
thank you
thank-
everybody for your input on this.
Yeah, thank you for all this work. I feel like it strikes just the right balance. I know you talked about that at the beginning, but I just feel that someone picking this up can see exactly where we're headed, but just, general enough, but with some specifics. So it's a great balance. So thank you for all of it.
Very
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so I think we were through our agenda on everything, other than anything else that anyone else has? No? Okay, our next meeting
Oh, yeah.
is in November.
So this one we rescheduled. I
Yeah,
think our next regular one is the 17th, which is also the night that we have a Community Preservation Committee meeting. So if we can get it done in an hour, I can do it. If not, no.
Anything that you think we would be talking about that could put us beyond our territory?
Not necessarily. Like, what do we need to do? Are we doing the grant program, right? We'd want to, like, yes, and that would be a thing. Which could be helpful if we're finalizing the action plan. The consultant to do a feasibility study, what is our timeline to know? So special town meeting is the 14th. I don't think we're going to have Claire have a chance to meet with the town administrator and get some guidance on if this is a thing we're actually doing by then. So we might actually be able to keep it to an hour. As long as everyone's okay with, I just have to know about it, 10 of.
So,
Thursday, the 17th at 6.
okay,
sounds good.
Yeah, all right. Okay,
Okay, I think we're all set. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Roll call, Amy Rodriguez, yes.
Chris
And-
Anchidi, yes.
and so Stephen, yes.
Jennifer Stacy, yes.
Thank
that
you all.
is, yeah, 7:52. Great.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Stephen,
Well, we'll see each other before then.
Yes,
the 17th.
All right. Thanks all. Be
Thank you
well. See you in
all.
a few weeks.
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye-bye.